Welcome to the Badass Lady Folk. I'm your host, Christine Stoddard. Thank you so much for watching or listening, whether it's on Manhattan Neighborhood Network or Radio Free Brooklyn. I'm really happy to welcome my guest today, Andie Fuentes.
Hello, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So Andie, my dear viewers, is in my play Mi Abuela, Queen of Nightmares, currently at the Tank Theater in New York City through October 1st. Andie, I'm going to try something that one of my professors at Columbia recently taught me.
Okay.
Which is to start a conversation like this, even in a like talk show format, right? Where I ask, what is it that I need to know about you in order to understand what makes you uniquely you? It's a lot of yous.
Wow. Yeah, and a big question too. I would say what you need to know to understand me is that I feel like everything that I have gone through as a human and as an artist has just motivated me more to not only be better in my life, but also just create more art. I don't know. Like, I feel like everything that's happened has just motivated me more to want to make art that tells a human story and to, like, just understand people better. I've been very blessed to go to a lot of different places in my life, whether it's living or school, and I've met a lot of different people, and I feel like all of that has just kind of made me want to continue to explore and continue to tell stories that not only reflect who I am, but just how humans interact with each other and how we can be good. So, yeah.
Beautiful. So I know you as a performer, and I'm curious how you came to theater, how you came to storytelling, film, any other kinds of acting that you do, and what it is you love about acting.
I've been acting since I was a really little girl. I would put on plays. I would make my abuelos pay to watch.
What did you charge them?
Like 5 pesos, not much. But, I still was making a pretty good living. But, yeah, so I've been acting since I was a very small child. But I'm the only performer in my family. Both of my parents are engineers with masters. My sister's an engineer. So I've never been good at math. I've never been good at science. I was always kind of the black sheep in the family in that way. They're also all very, like, shy and reserved, and I was never like that. I was always just trying to be the center of attention and wanting to just do things that people would watch. So, yeah, and then in high school, I realized that this was something I wanted to do more seriously, because up until then, my parents never really took it seriously when I said that I wanted to do this. It was just kind of like a hobby that I did after school. But in high school, I realized that this was something that I probably could do for the rest of my life. So I started taking a college prep class to go to theater school. And yeah, I went to 2 different colleges to study acting. And
which ones? Brag a little.
right after high school, I went to a school in New Mexico called Santa Fe University of Art and Design. And it was the best school ever. I loved it so much. But halfway through my freshman year, they announced that they were going bankrupt. And
whoa.
Yeah, so they basically told us all to pack our bags and that we would not be coming back for the rest forever, never again. So I had made so many best friends there. I love New Mexico. I love Santa Fe. I would go hiking every weekend. But yeah, so I transferred to the University of Oklahoma, which was always kind of my dream school, because a girl that when I was a freshman in high school, she was a senior. She went to OU, and I just thought that she was, like, the most amazing performer ever. I was the only girl that wasn't white in my grade in high school, and in theater, and she was that way in her senior class, so I was like, I need to go where you go. And so I followed her footsteps. I went to OU. And yeah, COVID hit, but I graduated and I stayed in Oklahoma for a bit. And that's when I started acting professionally. I worked a lot with a company called Oklahoma Shakespeare. They believed in me. I felt like college kind of really burnt me out, acting-wise.
Yeah, that's a common feeling among artists.
Yeah, it was a lot. But Oklahoma Shakespeare, I felt like, really gave me the confidence that I needed to keep going and not give up. So, yeah, I went there, and then I just moved to New York. It'll be 1 year next month. So
In October or November?
Yeah, October 3rd. Will be my 1 year in New York. So yeah, it's
Yay,
really
you did it.
I did.
You survived.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. I feel like I just moved here yesterday. I like have pictures. My first few weeks here, like it was nothing but my mattress on my floor. Like I still need a nightstand. There's stuff that I need to do, but it's been a really good year.
Oh, well, I'm so happy for you. That's a lot. And you're in this main stage production. Fiamma Piacentini, who I've had on the show, is our wonderful director, and she and I just loved you during the audition. Yeah, we were blown away.
Thank you.
All the stereotypes, all the gorgeous words, like that one, that one.
Thank you so much.
Why do you think that you stand out? Why do you think you want to stand out? Like you talked about wanting attention as a kid, right? Wanting to be at the center of it all. So what is it, do you think, that distinguishes you?
I think something I've always been very good at is being in touch of my feelings and being able to access them there very well. Not just in theater and performance, but also in real life. I've never been someone that's uncomfortable by crying or by talking about how we feel. And I feel like that has set me apart from other performers. I remember in school we would do a lot of exercises, and some of my friends would just have a lot of trouble accessing like those parts of ourselves that, you know, you don't want to share in real life at moments, but on stage sometimes you have to. And I feel like that's never really been an issue for me. I feel like the more I talk about my feelings and the more that I'm honest with myself about what makes me sad and what makes me angry, I think has just put me forward in a lot of places in my life, and also just created more authentic relationships, because I'm very honest about like what I want. Like if my partner I'm dating now, like from our very first date, I was like, I want this to be official, and he was like, I just met you last week, and I'm like, no, I feel good about this, you know. So I've always been very I've just always been not shy, I guess, to just say what my heart wants and what makes me feel good and not makes me feel good. So I think that that's just something that I want to encourage people to do too, because I feel like a lot of times people don't say what is really happening.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's just not good to hold in, because I feel like I've held in a lot of stuff, and then I just blow up. So I try to not do that anymore. I just try to really, you know, show those parts that we're afraid to show sometimes, both in real life and on stage. So
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that holding it in is because of capitalism, and that's something I always come back to on this show and in life, right? It's just like, put your head down, get the work done, don't get the boss mad, that kind of mentality.
yeah,
And people being scared about having to survive, right? Like having these very necessary material concerns, like we have to make money, we have to pay the rent, which is understandable. I get it.
Yeah.
We all get it. But would you attribute anything in particular in your early life to this kind of vulnerability, or at least this want for vulnerability?
I think also my culture kind of really played a part in that, because I remember the first time that I was really honest with my parents about like not feeling great was when that first university I went to shut down. I fell into a really bad depression, and I felt very lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember like I was a menace like that entire summer after my freshman year. Like I just felt awful, and I didn't like know why. My parents don't they're more understanding now, but like they didn't suggest therapy. They didn't like suggest any kind of help. They just told me like, suck it up, you know, people are dying. People like have it way worse than you. And I remember one day like I just broke down in tears, and I was like, Mom, Dad, like I don't feel okay. Like I had gained a lot of weight. I couldn't sleep. Like everything just felt awful and hopeless. And after that time that I was honest with them, I felt like I was just able to get so much off my shoulders. And after that, like I just wanted to continue to be that way. Like I just never wanted to feel that summer feeling again. So ever since that, like, I just have been trying to push that. But I just think that in Latin cultures, it's very sometimes shameful to like share those feelings. Like, I remember when I told my parents, I was like, I think I'm depressed. They were like, no, you're not. Like, you just had a like weird thing happen, but like people have it worse, you know? And like my mom didn't want to tell my grandparents what was going on. They knew that I wasn't feeling good, but she didn't want to admit that. So yeah, I feel like that's something that I definitely would like to have a bigger conversation in Latin communities about, because it's mental health is so important, and I feel like it's still very kind of, you know, just not okay there. So, yeah.
Well, I think especially for those of us who have immigrant parents, right? Like, and I completely agree with the Latin side of things, but I would say even outside of our culture, or in my case, my mother's culture and part of my culture, because my dad is a white dude, big old white guy. Yeah, there's just the like, I came here to this country. It was so hard for me to make a new life here. All the sacrifices I made, and what about you? Like like in my case, I was born here, right? I was raised here entirely, and it can be hard when things turn into the oppression Olympics.
Yeah.
Even if that's not what your family who loves you wants it to feel like, that's what it ends up being.
Yeah, they don't mean it, but I think it definitely is just a constant reminder. Even if they're not doing anything to imply that, I feel like my parents are immigrants too. Like, we moved back to the United States when I was 12, and both of my parents had very good jobs. Both of my parents had friends. All my family's in Mexico, so I watched them leave all of that behind to give my sister and I a better education and a safer environment. Because the part that I lived in Mexico back in 2010 during the drug war was just awful. And even if they don't do anything that reminds me that they left that, like, I still carry this burden that, like, my mom doesn't see her parents as often as she did. My mom does not have the work that she used to have because I'm here. So I feel like any time that I have a day off, like, I'm wasting time because
Yes.
my parents sacrificed so much for me to be here. And now I've left, like, they're in Texas, I'm here in New York. So now it's just a bigger reminder, like, they have done so much to get me where I need to be. They have provided for me. Even if they have not said anything, I'm still shaking, and I'm like, what can I do to be productive today and not waste this life that they have given me? And so, yeah, like, but I totally hear you. There has been so many moments where I'm reminded that I am here because they left a lot and sacrificed a lot, and I'm very grateful for that, and I'm trying my best to make the most of it.
Yeah, well, I can tell just by what you bring to your acting that you're serious,
Yeah.
you're focused,
I'm
right?
trying, yeah.
So, on that note, what kinds of stories appeal to you as an actress?
It's really funny. All throughout my educational training, I was always told that I was going to do more comedic stuff. I was always, I was just told I have a good sense of timing and that I am good with my physicality. So I always thought that was the direction I was going to end up in. But all of the work I've done has been more serious stuff. I feel like I haven't done. I'm desperate for a comedy because I'm like, I'm so scared of these feelings I've had. But yeah, I did Ophelia right before I came here. I was in Macbeth. Like, it's just, but I'm very grateful for that because I did not think that I had it in me to lead dramas and tell stories that are harder for both audience and performers to engage in. But yeah, that it's been really cool to do kind of more serious stuff. I definitely love telling stories that have to do with my culture. This piece that we're working on now is my first show in New York that I've done that has to do with my culture, and that's been really fun and healing to do. I hadn't done a Latin play in a very long time, and I felt like the first time I did it, which was at OU, it was just a very tokenized piece because they just wanted to give the students that weren't white, basically, something to kind of shut us up about because we had not been cast at all. So it was nice to do something that I felt like was uplifting the performers and not just kind of throwing a bone at us because we were, not getting cast. So, yeah, but I really just want to tell all kinds of stories. Like, I love doing Shakespeare. I think that's really cool, but I do want to do a comedy. If I had a better singing voice, I would love to do musicals, and maybe I can train some more and do that. I just saw Harry Potter last night with my family and The Cursed Child, and I feel like that would be so cool just for the special effects. So, yeah, I want to tell all kinds of stories. I just think that that's such a cool way to connect with other people. And, yeah.
What were some of the plays you did in college?
In college, I had a pretty educational theater left me pretty burnt out. Yeah, both OU and the high school I went to they were very white institutions, both professors and students. So I didn't get cast basically at all, and the few roles I did were just because they had kind of started to crack down on students getting neglected. And so I did a play
I'm sorry, I just want to stop for a moment
Oh, no, you're
and
good.
say, like, that must have been so painful.
It was. By the time I graduated, I was pretty ready to quit. Like I in high school, we did Hamlet, and I got told by my professor like she can't put Mexicans in Denmark, and so
No.
yeah, no, that's not even the worst I've had. Like that was like, and so playing Ophelia, like all these years later, like that was kind of a full circle moment for me because I remember
Good.
like when you're in an educational setting and you want so badly to fit in and you're paying money for these people who are supposed to know better and are supposed to take care of you, you believe what they say. So I remember she said that to me and I was like, that makes perfect sense. Why would a Mexican be in Denmark, And now I look back and I want to just hold my high school self and be like, that was not okay. But I know why you thought it was, and I know that you wanted to believe that she knew what she was doing. And college was the same way. I spent most of my college years really educating the professors instead of being educated by them because it was OU, I boomer sooner, but it's a very old school classic mentality of let's only study Beckett and Arthur Miller and all these white guys, and they're scared, I think, to accept that the world is changing and that they are no longer, the focus on in storytelling,
Yeah, I love when the diversity, quote unquote, on a college syllabus is like one play by one white woman
Yeah.
who still went to an Ivy League school.
Yeah. It was really messed up. OU, like, yeah, I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for OU because all of my peers, I feel like, were very good to me and they helped me, like, with my connections. But the school itself, I think, has a lot of work that it needs to do.
So then tell me about Oklahoma Shakespeare. How did you get hooked up with them?
They had a really good relationship with the University of Oklahoma. And so I was constantly auditioning for them. And there was a man there, bless his heart, his name's Tyler Woods. And he just believed in me. And I wasn't getting cast at school, but he cast me in one of his shows. And after that, like, I just never stopped working with them throughout my time in Oklahoma. I just did one show with him, and he just took me in his care. And I think he knew that I was having a hard time. We never spoke about it, but I think he could just tell because it was just so crazy. I remember if it weren't for Oklahoma Shakespeare, by the time I graduated college, my resume was bare. I didn't really
Wow.
have any college credits or school credits for myself. And so I got to do a lot of work with them. And
How many years was that?
I started working with them in 2020, right as the pandemic started, and I left OU 2022, so 2 years. But I did quite a few shows with them, and I understudied, and I worked behind the scenes, and I would go back and do another show with them because they were just so special to me. Yeah, they kept calling me back, and they kept offering me stuff and believing in me, and yeah, it's just, they're very special to me. I talked to Tyler, actually, opening night for our show, because he called me, he congratulated me. And he's just been very good to me.
Yeah,
So.
he sent an email because I had contacted them. I noticed it was actually Fiamma first who noticed Oklahoma Shakespeare on your resume, and we were very impressed because not many people who have just finished college can say, yes, I was in, whatever regional Shakespeare theater production more than once, and especially in a lead role. And yeah, when we started putting out all the press and I was emailing 10,000 people, I made sure to email them to make, just so they knew, like, look, this is what their hometown girl, quote unquote, is doing.
Mm-hmm. That's so sweet. Yeah, yeah. I left. I think Hamlet closed like the day I moved out of Oklahoma, like or the day before, and they gave me such like a nice send off, and they've just been so good to me. So yeah, I felt like if it weren't for Tyler and Oklahoma Shakespeare, I honestly might have quit acting like after college because it was a mess, and uh, I felt like I had no tools in my little actor basket from college to kind of help me go into the real world. And everything I feel like I've learned has been through them. So I feel very grateful for them.
Yeah, well, I'm happy all that happened because, yeah, that all of that at school sounds like a nightmare, and I can relate to some extent.
Yeah, and I feel like that's like at the beginning, like as much as a lot of the college stuff was really like hard, I felt like if I hadn't had that kind of like rejection and that kind of environment where I realized that I have to speak up for myself and I have to, call out what isn't right, I felt like I wouldn't be the person I am today. In high school, I was very much so like not confrontational, and anything that was said to me, it's water off my back. I'm not going to say anything. But in college, whenever something was said that I was uncomfortable by or that wasn't okay, I was the first person to say something. And I feel like, and I was always told by my professors that I was like hard to work with. And I was like, I'm not hard to work with. You just don't like that, you can't say certain things in front of me because I am going to say something.
Yeah.
So, and now I feel like I'm very good at speaking up for myself and others and kind of taking more leadership positions. And I think it's helped my confidence a lot too.
Yeah, and it's especially important to be that way in life as a woman of color, and even more so in New York City, and even more so in a super competitive industry like theater.
Yeah.
If you don't speak up for yourself, no one else is going to do it the vast majority of time.
Exactly.
Most people are not looking out for you, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I had to learn that the hard way, but I'm glad I did. Yeah.
So what are some of the best experiences you've had in New York in the past year? Things that really get you excited and make you feel grateful.
Mm-hmm. I was so grateful. By the time I moved here, a lot of my best friends already lived here. Like 2 blocks from me too, I moved to Washington Heights, which I was always excited about as a Latina woman, I was like, Washington Heights, so that made me really excited, and that was a very like full circle moment to me. My family's come to see me in like the shows I've been in, so having my abuelos up here in New York City, like that is just so wild to me, because not only am I realizing my dream, but like now I get to share that with them, and they get to see me like perform in like New York stages. I saw Taylor Swift in May, which I'd never seen her before, and that felt so cool. My partner now, he's from Rhode Island, and I'd never, like, New York is definitely the farthest up this coast that I'd been, but now that I'm dating him, I go to Rhode Island all the time, and I do, like, Rhode Island things like clamming, and
could you explain what clamming is?
Yeah, so you basically go in the water and you're just putting your feet in the sand and kind of feeling about, kind of scuffling a bit until you feel something, whether it's a rock, but it's probably a clam, and then you can either scoop it up with your toes or dive in and pick it up, and then you cook them and you have a great meal. So yeah, so I do a lot of that, and that's been really cool too, to like kind of get out of the city and do that. But there's just so many moments that I'm here and I just take it all in. I can't believe it. Like when I'm on the NQR going from Manhattan to Brooklyn, and it goes like above the bridge, so you're just seeing the whole Manhattan skyline. Those are moments where I'm like, wow, like I can't believe I'm here. And walking through Central Park is also very soul feeding for me. So yeah, there is a lot of stuff that I just love this city so much for it.
What are you hoping for in the next year?
And next year, I want to hopefully continue to make art and make connections. I feel like I've met some really cool people this year through the shows I've done. Like you and Fiamma, like I feel so honored that I get to like have two like badass like,
Badass lady folk, yeah.
like
Fiamma doesn't like saying the word, but
well, I mean she's a badass, you know.
She is.
So it feels so cool now. Like I didn't know you know, a couple months ago, but now I do, and I get to read your stuff, and I get to like, you know, so that's all very exciting for me. So I want to continue to do that. I want to continue to explore more parts in the Upper East Coast. I feel like that's really cool. Yeah, I'm just really excited to explore more things in New York.
Yay! Well, I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
I've been here 7 years now, but I'm remembering what going into year 2 was like.
Yeah, I feel like I just now like have my feet on the ground, and I like, you know, my parents were here this past week, and they like completely redid my room because it needed some stuff. I didn't have curtains. I didn't have. They came in, they completely redid everything. They hung up some. I have some paintings that my abuelo did. So now I can say his art is hanging up in New York City. So yeah, they helped me, and now I feel very good going into year 2.
I love that you have his paintings. What are they of, like the subjects?
He does everything. Like he does fruit, he does animals, and he's such a great artist. The ones I have in my room, I have a landscape of this water, and there's like a bunch of cherry blossoms, and I have another one I took that right off his wall in his house. I was like, I'm sorry, Grandpa, I love this so much, and it's of a parakeet, and it's like with its mouth open, squawking, and there's a bunch of like Mexican art in the picture. And it's my favorite one. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Mexico and let's talk about Texas a little bit. Speaking of paintings, speaking of grandparents, right? So, where did you grow up? How did you grow up?
I was born in El Paso, Texas. I didn't live there for very long. My family moved us back to Mexico when I was pretty young. So that's where my grandparents were. It was after my dad's dad passed away that my parents realized that we didn't really have a place in the U.S. You know, their family's in Mexico. Why are we there? You know, my sister and I were Mexican. They wanted us to learn Spanish, and they wanted us to be close to our family. So I lived in Nuevo León for all my time in Mexico, and it was really nice. I had my mom's parents just like 2 hours away. My dad's family wasn't that far either. So, yeah, that was really, really cool, and I miss it a lot. The food was great. I remember I had lovely friends. I didn't do that much theater there, but, you know, I was a young kid, so I remember my dad is very sporty. He was very athletic throughout his whole life, so I did a lot of sports because he wanted an athletic child. So I did basketball and soccer and volleyball. None of it stuck, but yeah, I did a lot of that. And then we moved to the United States in 2010 to San Antonio.
And did that feel like a shock or no?
Yeah, it was a pretty big shock. I felt like for my parents, more so my sister and I remember they did a lot to help us assimilate. And there was some stuff that I felt a little bit lost on. Like, the biggest things were when I moved here, pop culture, I felt like I did not really understand. I remember people would ask me, like, did you see That's So Raven last night? And I had no idea what they were talking about. And my mom, I remember, she was so embarrassed when my sister and I would go to school because she would pick us up, and she felt like all of our clothes were very Mexican compared to the other kids. So I remember, like, my first month in the U.S., she took us to, like, Abercrombie and, like, spent, like, $500 on, like, each of us. Because
wow.
because she felt like this was, like, the right thing to do to get us to fit in. Because that's what she saw the other kids wearing, you know? So she did that. My parents, like, looked up things that American kids do, and I got sent to SeaWorld camp My
What
first
is
year.
that?
It's basically a summer camp, but at SeaWorld. This is pre-Blackfish, so yeah.
Could you tell listeners who might not know what Blackfish is?
Blackfish is a documentary on SeaWorld, the theme park where they like keep the killer whales and dolphins. It's just not very humane, but yeah, so it just kind of exposes that. But when we went to SeaWorld camp, it was like a lot of burgers, and you got to sleep in the aquarium and go backstage. So we thought America was great. We were like, this is so cool. So yeah, I did that. So yeah, that was a pretty big shock. I remember to kind of tie theater in a bit, when I was in Mexico, I did do a bit of theater, and I was always told I had an American accent. And so I still got cast, but I always struggle with my accent. They were like, you sound too American. So when I moved to the United States, I was like, perfect. Like, I'm not going to get told this anymore. And then immediately I was told, oh, you have a very strong Latin accent.
Oh, my God.
So I felt like I never belonged anywhere. And that was very kind of hard. I feel like still to this day I get kind of self-conscious about the way I talk, just because it's just been something that's pointed out to me throughout my entire life. So now I just don't know what I sound like, but you know, and it's one of those things where you feel like you don't belong in either, you know, because you get told that you're not enough in this culture and you're not enough in that one. So I was happy to move to the U.S., but there was a lot of stuff that was just so different and shocking. And yeah, but I was also so young, so I felt like it wasn't too hard to kind of figure it out.
What kind of school did you go to in Mexico?
Private Catholic school.
Okay, I had a feeling.
Yeah, and then I went to a public, just American high school. So that was a lot too. Yeah.
For my mom, assimilation for her in some ways, well, for everyone, it's tough, I'm sure, but the toughest thing for her, I think, was trying to maintain some of her Catholic values with her ideas about women's rights. Because one of the reasons why she left El Salvador when she met my dad and had the opportunity to do so was she wanted to live in a place where women had maybe not equality, but more equitable life, where abortion is, when she moved here, was legal, right? Everywhere. When she moved here, it was just a standard that girls go to school. Yeah. And where she's from, it's not necessarily like that. And some girls, if they do go to school, get pulled out right around their quince because, okay, you're a little woman now. It's time for you to get married. Time for you to have children.
Clean the house.
Yeah, so it was just this balancing act for her of wanting to have some of these Catholic Latin traditions that were, by American standards, more conservative, while at the same time making sure that she had daughters who went to school, who went to college, who had careers. Yeah. And it was really hard for her to negotiate. I think she's still in a process. And now that I'm an adult and we've had conversations that never would have happened when I was a teenager, yeah, I have a better understanding of some of the decisions that she made when I was a kid about things like sex education, for instance. Yeah. So I'm curious if, I mean, it sounded like with your mom going to Abercrombie that she was really like, okay, you're going to be American.
Yeah.
But were there certain questions or challenges where you saw your parents struggling, like, God, do we do it like how we were raised, or do we do it like this is what they're doing in the U.S., this is what they're doing at their school?
Yeah, I think the clothing stuff was the only thing that my mom was willing to like budge on. Everything else, my parents, I think the thing that they told me the most growing up is, we're going to raise our children the way we want, and you raise them the way you want, because they stuck so hard to their Catholic Mexican values. Another thing my mom says all the time is, we're Mexican, and this is how we do it. Like, this past week, they invited my partner out for dinner, but they wanted to have dinner at 3 p.m. because they like eating so early. And I remember my partner was like, it's kind of early for dinner. And my mom goes, well, that's how we do it in Mexico. And I was like, okay, thanks, Mom. So, yeah, they're both diehard Catholics, and they, like, everything I did growing up was around that. Like, I did not have a sex education Both in middle school and high school, you needed the permission slip signed to take those classes, and my mom did not do that. So it wasn't like until halfway through high school that one of my friends was like, "Do you know how sex works, Andie?" And I was like, "Yeah, you just did." And they were like, "No, that's not."
Oh no!
Yeah. So I was pretty. I know why they did it, like, because that's just how they were raised, and that's what but I mean, I like they said, I felt like if I have kids, like, I am gonna, like, so, but I don't have any, like, resentment towards that. I feel like that's just what they thought was best. They both definitely like going about, church and the Bible, and if something's happening, both of my parents were like, pray about it, like, just that's like always their first suggestion. If I get married, I know that if I want them there, it has to be through the Catholic Church, doesn't matter if I want that, that's just what I'm gonna have to do. And stuff like that, I don't mind, if it makes my abuelita happy to see me get married in a church, then who am I to deny her that? So, yeah, they definitely did everything the way that they were raised and the way that they saw it. Like, there's still some stuff that, even now, I'm 25 years old, I've lived in a different state from them for the last 6 years, but there's still stuff that they're like, mija, like, they look up my location 24/7, all the time. My sister will text me. She's like, Dad knows you're not home right now. And I'm like, I'm at a party. What? Am I supposed to ask for permission? You don't live here. You're an hour behind. And, like, if I'm at my partner's house and it's getting late, my mom will be like, when are you going home? And I'm like, oh, my goodness. Like, you're in Texas, lady. I'm in New York. So they are very strict. But I know that it's all from a place of love. And, like, they tell me all the time, like, when you have a kid, you're going to realize, like, how important it is to, like, know where they are, and, like, so stuff like that, I'm like, I understand.
Yeah, I still deal with some of that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think negotiating boundaries is something I'm still learning how to do. And I don't know, like, I think some of these rules have softened, especially as my parents get older and my dad, my mom gets further and further from her culture, and my dad will say, like, I've been married and now divorced, right? And my dad will remind her of that, which to my mom is like, she's gotten over it, but of course at the beginning it was a big shock and she was very upset. Because he was Catholic, so that was like, you had it in the bag. You did it right. And then, but especially now that has happened, my relationship with my mother especially has changed, because she sees, okay, some of these boundaries and some of these rules that I had for you when you were 15 or 25 can't be what they are now.
Yeah.
They have to change.
I know, and they're not happy about it, you can tell, but they're trying their best. That's how my parents are. They're trying their best to accept it, but it's still gonna be a conversation. Yeah.
I want to hear about your grandparents and their influence on you.
All of my abuelas and my abuelitos have the biggest place in my heart. They've all been so supportive. My dad's mom, her name is Luchi, and I've always had such a close relationship with her, especially because my grandfather passed away when I was so young. So I've always called her Abuelita Extreme, because she was always, she just does, like, really, like, adventurous stuff. Like, my dad would take us to go, like, swim with, like, dolphins or, like, go hiking, and my grandma was always there, and she was always doing it with us. So, and yeah, we've just always had a very playful relationship. Since my grandpa passed away so young, I felt like I spent a lot of, like, my childhood trying to find my grandma boyfriend, and so, like, I would just point at, like, guys in the street and I'd be like, Grandma, that's your boyfriend. And one time I was with her, we were in I think we were in France, because one of my uncles lives in Europe, And
Fancy,
no,
okay.
pretty fancy. But we were in France, and there was this guy, and he had this big bouquet of flowers on the train. And I turned to my grandma, and I was like, "Grandma, that's your," in Spanish, I was like, "That's your boyfriend. He got you those flowers," thinking the guy does not speak Spanish. And the guy turned to us, and he goes, "Yeah, they're for my girlfriend." And he gave my grandma some flowers.
Oh.
And I was like, wow. But I was so embarrassed. I was like, I can't believe you understood me. So, yeah, I've always been very, like, playful with her. And then my mom's parents, they're a little bit more serious than my dad's mom, but they are still the most lovable human beings in the whole world. They both, when I moved to New York, they gave me quite a bit of money, and they were like, we've saved this up our whole lives.
Wow.
And we always wanted to leave it to, like, our grandchildren, and we're giving it to you now. And that just, like, broke me down, because I was like, before I was even born, they were saving this money. And the fact that they just, like, believed in me, in my dream, that just, like, they've just always taken so much care of me. So, yeah, like, my grandpa's an artist, my mom, they're both teachers, but my grandfather's been painting since he was so young, and so, like, his art means so much to me. And
He teaches art, or he teaches something else?
no, they both teach, like, social studies. They're retired now, but that's what they taught. That's just something he did as a hobby. I remember growing up, like, in the house, there were just always these paintings around us. And it's just something he loves doing. So, yeah, and then my mom's mom is just the sweetest. She's also so emotional like me. We're both Pisces. And so, yeah, she's just someone that I love talking to. And I call my grandparents every single day. I called them on my way here. It's just so important to me to talk to them and to let them know how I'm doing. And, yeah, like, when they came to New York, they were very much so, like, also being as strict as parents are, like, they go on the subway and they're like, you do this by yourself? Like, yeah, but it's okay, like, I don't want you to worry. But, you know, they still worry. And so I sometimes have to, like, be sneaky. And if I'm, like, working later that day, like a closing shift, and I talk to them, I tell them that I worked an earlier shift, so they don't worry that I'm on the subway late. But all my grandparents just mean so much to me. So doing this show has just, it's been so touching to kind of, like, think back on, like, what my grandparents have played in my life. And, yeah, they've just always been so good to me.
That's beautiful. So for listeners who might not be familiar with the show, and also just for me, I'm curious, how would you describe or explain what Mi Abuela, Queen of Nightmares is?
To me, Mi Abuela, the Queen of Nightmares, is really a story about a girl who is not only navigating, you know, being a mixed child without a father. It's a story about, like, generational trauma and what happens when those conversations don't happen, and when we kind of get so lost in ourselves and our grief. I've always been very blessed to have a very, like, deep and loving relationship with my mom, but I think there is just a lot that can be lost on a young woman if she does not have that figure to look up to. And I think that Mi Abuela, Queen of Nightmares, is about when you lose those women that you're supposed to look up to, especially in Latin culture. I feel like there's so much of my mom that my heart breaks for her, because I feel like there's just so much that Latino women have to put up with, and I just think that she's so strong. And so when you don't have, like, a strong figure, I think it can be very easy to be lost as a child and as a young teen and as an adult. So I think it's just kind of figuring out, like, your place in the world, but also just kind of working through that family dynamic, and not only, like, your relationship with your mom, but how her relationship with hers unfolded and how it's now affected this chain. And maybe, like, I like to think that, like, if Maya had a child, that, like, she, like, stopped that, like, chain of, like, trauma, and, like, you know, like, she's gonna create, like, the relationship and affection that child needs. So, yeah.
A+. I always enjoy hearing other people summarize or explain something that I've made. I don't know if you, like, have that interest in hearing, like, if you do a play or a film, and just hearing what people thought it was about.
Yeah, I've loved my friends' interpretation. A lot of them I did not give them like any context about what it was about, and so I had a friend tell me that she felt like the owl was like a connection between the real world and the spiritual world, because the owl would like come in and like leave postcards from the mom the way we directed it. I felt like that was a really cool interpretation because I felt like a lot of this play, it is a memory play, so it is really cool to kind of see it as like a being that's going between Maya's memories and then now the storytelling to the audience. So yeah, I do really like hearing what other people think.
That's a great interpretation.
Yeah, I loved it.
Huh.
And I think also, since I worked with Shakespeare so much, it was really cool to kind of have this, your language is very Shakespearean to me, because it is very poetical, and it's very, the way that Maya tells stories, it's heightened language, but it's also just very, I think, lyrical and almost, I don't want to say romanticized, but there is something just so elegant about the way that she phrases these awful things that have happened to her. She makes sound so beautiful because the language is just so, yeah, it's just very nice.
Thanks. I wasn't looking for it, but I'll take it.
No, I really like it. I think that also, because I feel like this story could be very different if it's, since she's a younger girl at the beginning of the play, if it's like told by the way that like a child kind of talks,
Mm-hmm.
I love working with children, and I nanny quite a bit, so I've seen the way they talk, and I think that this would be a completely different show if it was kind of taking that direction. So yeah.
Yeah, I write so many different kinds of things and so many different voices, and it fascinates me that you and Fiamma both said it when Fiamma was getting ready for our callbacks, and she was trying to just like quickly explain to each actor what the play was and what the tone was. She said, yeah, it's like Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. For everyone who came for the callback for Maya, it was, yeah, it's like Shakespeare. Say it like it's Shakespeare. And for almost everyone that clicked, they
Mm-hmm.
understood what she meant by that. There were a couple who was like,
Right.
okay, maybe we're not speaking the same, like, theatrical language.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious what attracts you to Shakespeare.
I think the biggest thing, one, was that I was told a lot that I couldn't do it because I was a woman of color, and it was always going towards like the white students,
Jesus.
Like when I played, I had that thing happen in high school with Ophelia, but then when I did it again in college, or after college, I had already booked the role. It was probably like my 6th production with Oklahoma Shakespeare, but I ran into one of my old professors at OU, or from OU, and she didn't know that I had already booked it. And she came up to me and she was like, oh, like, are you doing another show with Oklahoma Shakespeare? And I was like, yeah, I auditioned for Hamlet. I didn't say anything because the cast list wasn't out. And she was like, well, I heard that so-and-so, a white girl, is going to be Ophelia. And it just felt so good that I didn't say anything, but I was like, man, like, that, good for her. I'm sure she'll be great, So, and, just getting to walk away knowing that, like, I can't wait to see a look on your face when you find out that it's me,
Oh my God,
yeah,
priceless.
Yeah, and I think, like, just being told that, like, I couldn't do it because I had an accent and the language was too complicated for me was just what motivated me even more to want to do it and to want to understand it and learn it. And now that I have done a couple shows, I just really appreciate the kind of groundwork that he has set for playwriting for the rest of the time, and how many different stories have like come out from his original works. Like I feel like kind of a nerd, but like when I'm like watching like The Lion King or like West Side Story, and I'm like, that's how I connect to Shakespeare, like, so that's really cool. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that first attracted me to him was that no one believed I could do it. So I was like, I'm just going to show you that I can. And I'm going to do it well. I'm not just going to do it. I'm going to do a very good job. So you can see that women of color and deserve to be in these roles too. I think that was my biggest problem with OU was they did a lot of shows that they wanted to be historically accurate was always the word that they used. So that was always my biggest thing, as I was like, you don't cast the students of color because it's not historically accurate. But what is historically, like, what does it matter in 2022 if you have a white girl or a brown girl in Radium Girls. You know, it's a play
Yeah.
about girls that, you know, died while working. So what does it matter, you know? And that was always the biggest, I think, clash between me and OU, is they just didn't really want to get on board with that mentality. And so it just motivated me to show them why they should, because the rest of the world is moving on and doing it, so they should too.
Yeah, and so many of those classics obviously were written at a time of segregation, even, and intense discrimination, legal discrimination, where it was out in the open and obvious, not as much as like today, where a lot of things are more social, right? It's
Yeah.
more social discrimination, not necessarily legal discrimination. That exists, but it's
Yeah.
not to the same extent. So yeah, no, I am endlessly frustrated. And I think that's a big problem in the arts in general. It's not just theater. It's for movies too. It's for art. It's
Yeah.
for architecture even. I used to do a
Wow.
lot of work for an architecture preservation organization whose name I will not mention right here. But there was a lot of, no, we can't renovate this building this particular way because in 1927 it was done by this and by a group of European descent, blah,
Right.
blah, blah. Like, it's a building,
Yeah.
yo. Like, anyone lives in a
They're
building.
not even alive anymore. Yeah. They don't care. Yeah. It's weird.
I want to hear about film and video work or interests of yours.
I have done quite a bit. I've a bit of background stuff. Oklahoma actually became a very big film hub by the time I left. After COVID, you know, it's very expensive to kind of film in California, like places that follow COVID rules. But in a red state like Oklahoma, they don't follow COVID rules. So I felt like a lot of film productions came to that state because it was a lot cheaper to film there. So by the time I left, Sylvester Stallone was filming Tulsa King. They have that Hulu show Reservation Dogs.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's all in Oklahoma. And like I worked very closely with Chris Freihofer, who was also another great mentor of mine. He believed in me too and gave me opportunities that OU didn't. But yeah, so I did quite a bit of film there. And
Did you do anything with Reservation Dogs?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I was too focused with Oklahoma Shakespeare. I've always enjoyed theater more than film. I definitely am not one to say no to a film audition. You know, money's nicer there.
Yes.
So who am I to turn that down? But I've always just enjoyed how present you have to be in theater. And I felt like in film a lot, especially in my film classes that I took, for me, I'm very much someone that lives in my head. And I get insecure very easily. And so sometimes in film, you know, they call cut and they start over and it has nothing to do with you. It's the lighting or it's, you know, like there was a plane going over. But I always
But what
think
did
it's
I
me.
do?
Yeah.
What did I do?
I always think like having to do the same performance over and over again, like it loses its meaning to me. And I feel like I'm no longer giving something that's real. I'm just trying to either recreate what I've already done or I'm just, yeah. So theater, the fact that like, you know, it's live, it's happening whether you like it or not, like you like that's yeah, that's always been something that feels a lot more comfortable for me as a performer. But yeah, I do. My mom has like all of her dreams for me are like she wants me to be on SNL and she wants me to, you know, so she definitely wants me to do a lot of film. But I don't know, we'll see. We'll see what I do. I have my agent right now. She's very kind. She thinks I'm like very good at like commercial stuff. So I've had a lot of commercials like this past year for like dog food brands and sportswear, and that's been really fun. I think you can have a lot of fun in those auditions. So, yeah.
What do you think is different about acting in a commercial than acting in a play?
I think I think it's a little more cheesy in a
Yeah.
commercial, you know, like there's been so many auditions where I just have to, you know, smile on camera. And, you know, I had one audition where all they sent me was, we just want to see how good you cry. And so, yeah, I just sat in front of camera and did that. But I think acting in a play, the biggest difference is like you're not only present with yourself. You have to be present with what's happening around you. You know, you have to give your partners as much and like actually listen to them. In the commercial, I feel like it's just trying to engage with the camera, but you want to engage with the other human being because we're trying to replicate human behavior, and you can't do that if you're not listening actively to your partner and, you know, really just being in it with them.
Where do you think you learned presence?
I think I learned that through my human relationships. I think especially I feel like I have not been as close to my family as I would like to be since I've always lived so far away. So I think my friendships and romantic relationships have taught me the most about being present, especially my romantic ones. I feel like in high school I also lacked a lot of self-confidence. And so now, like, being able to, like, meet another human being and, like, try to connect with them, I feel like that has taught me a lot about, like, being present, not only, like, for yourself, but, like, for someone else. Like, because I know that, like, when I'm with someone, I want to feel seen and I want to feel heard. And so I feel like I try very hard in my relationships, both romantic and not, to make whoever I'm with feel like they're safe and that they're, you know, taken care of if they want to share anything. I feel like a lot of my friends always tell me that, like, I ask, are you okay a lot? And I know that it can be annoying, but I think it's just something I do because same way that I want to feel like if I need something that I'm going to get it, I want other people to feel that way too. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, I want to back up to industry stuff. Is there something that you want to change for the theater industry now?
Yeah, same. I feel like my biggest goal in college was to just make the environment better for the next Latina that comes in. That was always my biggest, like, I feel like I could have saved myself so many tears and trouble if I just not said anything. But at the end of the day, everything I did was because I would see the girls that would come audition on campus, and I wanted them to have a better experience than what I had. So I want to make this the kind of place, especially in educational settings, because I feel like so much of my life could have changed depending on how that went. I just want to make that an environment to where people no longer have to feel like they have to make a choice of doing what's right and not saying anything because now you're hard to work with or now you're not going to get cast and roles are sacrificed. So I just want this to be a more acceptable community and one where people feel safe in.
Is that something that you can see yourself getting involved in a more formal way for the industry?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that despite how hard it was on me mentally and emotionally, it was something that I felt really good about. We changed the curriculum my senior year, so we did add,
What?
we changed the curriculum quite a bit.
How?
It was the summer of 2020, so the Black Lives Matter movement was at its highest, and we had the teachers at a point where they no longer, could really ignore us or say no. And I also got very lucky at, a lot of my white friends who had not spoken up because it didn't affect them were finally realizing, even if it's later rather than sooner, they were finally realizing, oh, we need to step it up. And so with them, we were able to finally get the teachers to be on our side. So, yeah, and that's definitely something I want to continue to do.
Have you gotten involved in any of the SAG strike stuff or not really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been to quite a few of the rallies, and I think that that's also really important. Just doing stuff that helps other people, I think, is something that I could dedicate my life to, and it just makes me feel good.
Ooh, I like that. All right, is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, I felt like this was so healing. I felt like this was almost a therapy session. I felt very heard, the same way that I told you I wanted to feel, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm so happy that I met you, and I'm so happy that you're in the show. Dear listeners or viewers, whether you are watching on Manhattan Neighborhood Network or listening on Radio Free Brooklyn, I'm your host, Christine Stoddard. My guest on this episode was Andie Fuentes. You've been watching or listening The Badass Lady Folk. Find us on all of the million different platforms that are out there, and tune in next time.